Oh, okay. I see some.
Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, we got Richard in the house from Seymour, Japan. Ooh. Excited to go. We got, I'm sorry guys if I butcher names. I'm gonna try my best. Correct me if I mess it up. Janjira says that she's excited to go back to Bangkok to visit her grandma. India, Maria says India from Encompass. Oh, Paris, yes. And Kita, I was in Paris once. It was beautiful.
We have some on the Hoover app. Mona shares that they'd like to travel to Hawaii, and Vatsa shared that they'd like to travel to India where their mom is.
All right, so it looks like we're still waiting for, is everyone in here? Let's see, I have 26 I'm seeing.
Some people are coming on as we're talking too. Say that again.
Do you see the entire PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, great, perfect. All right, so let's get started and we'll just go ahead and let people hop on. So welcome to, I have to hop out of Uva because it's echoing. So Belina, just go ahead and make sure, you're keeping an eye on that. Thank you. Welcome to Mindfulness for Youth Workers. Super excited to have you all here. Let's see. My name is Yasmin Habib, and Belina and I will introduce ourselves in a second, but what we have on our agenda today is introductions. We're going to talk a little bit about mindfulness, well, a lot about mindfulness, what mindfulness is, how it helps us overall, whether you are a youth worker or not, and specifically how it can benefit you as a youth worker in your interactions with your students and your families. And we're going to get a little bit of practice with a gentle guided practice, and then we'll have time for some questions and answers. And I'll connect you all with some resources if you are interested in learning more about mindfulness. So again, if you're still joining or you just joined, please share your name, your organization, and your favorite place to travel to in the Whova chat box. So introductions on our end. My name is Yasmin Habib. I am the founder and executive director of World Mind Creation Academy. I am a life coach in training and a mindfulness advocate. I am Somali American. I came to the US when I was about 5 years old with my family as a refugee. And I am the eldest of 5 girls. So that means I always had to share my clothes, could never keep anything to myself. My makeup, it was always out of my room, okay? But I'm blessed to have my family. They are my best friends, my sisters. I love to sing, create. I love to celebrate. I will celebrate any and every holiday. Whatever brings us together, I'm here for it. But I cannot cook. So please do not ask me to bring an original dish to any of the potlucks. I will absolutely have to go to Safeway and pick something up, okay? And I refuse to cook. I refuse to learn how to cook. I'm not gonna suffer through my own cooking. Oh, there we go.
Yeah. Yeah. So my name is Belina, and I'm the youth program coordinator. I am Eritrean American. I'm an artist, also an aspiring beach lady. Um, and the most important thing I wanted to say and share with you all is that pineapples do go on pizza. And if you disagree, don't tell me because I will die on that hill.
Thank you, Belina.
Yeah.
Um, so a little bit about our organization. We are called World Mind Creation Academy, and our mission is to provide holistic support to youth and families from marginalized communities through culturally responsive programming. Um, so we are an organization that is BSK funded, and we are founded and led by first generation refugee and immigrant women, primarily from East Africa, such as myself and Belina. And we work with youth from refugee and immigrant backgrounds. So a lot of the work that we do revolves around connecting youth to mentors who look like them, who speak their languages, who can relate to their unique experiences of what it means, for example, to be, an East African girl in addition to a Black girl in America. And really, providing a space for you to explore those nuances and explore the different multi-dimensional aspects of who they are safely and with a lot of non-judgment. And we provide holistic support, and one of the ways that we've done that in the last couple of years is through this mindfulness program. So in 2019, Belina and I went through a training through Mindful Schools. It was a 12-week training, and the first part of the training really focused on us cultivating our own mindfulness practice. So understanding what mindfulness is, understanding how it benefits us, and cultivating that practice over time. And then the second half of the training was focused on learning how to deliver a 12-week K through 12 research-backed mindfulness curriculum to our students. And we've finally started to incorporate that this year into all of our programs. So we're super excited to share with you all this tool, this self-care tool that has proven to be very valuable for me, for us. And so before we move into it, I would like to get a little understanding of where everyone is at. So we have a poll, and Belina's gonna go ahead and, there we go. Have you had any experience with mindfulness before? And our answers are no, never, a little bit, a lot of experience, or you're basically Yoda. You don't need to be here. In fact, you could probably be teaching this. Or maybe you're just not here. You've elevated and transcended.
Yes, I love that.
And please, yes, feel free to unmute yourself and talk to me. This is, I love to talk, I love to interact, so don't feel like this is overly formal. Okay. We got a lot of little bits coming in. Good, good. I feel like I need some background music. All right, so the results are in. Lots of a little bits. Nobody's Yoda, nobody's transcended, or I mean, maybe they have, they just couldn't vote. So great, okay, and a lot of experience. We got a few people with a lot of experience. So exciting, let's connect and you could teach me something. Okay, let's see. Stop sharing the results. So when you think of mindfulness, if you could type this in the chat box, what is one word that comes to mind? And Belina, if you could shout them out. Ooh, oh, there we go.
Yes, so we got peace, relax,
Relaxed.
centering, aware, grounded, self-aware from Soraya on Huva. In the moment, tranquil, calm, present, free, light, grounded.
Nice.
Respect.
That's a good one. Respect.
Being present in the moment. Respectful.
Yes. Yes.
Grace, present, breathing. The question, somebody asked, what was the question? The question is one word that comes to mind when you think of what mindfulness. Clarity, focusing on breath. These are more answers.
Clarity. Very good. Very good. Please keep typing. Freedom, inner peace. Yes. Yes, 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 yes. Thank you so much. So there are a lot of, as you can tell, there's a lot of ways to think about mindfulness, but everybody's getting circling around that same idea of groundedness and openness. And my favorite definition of mindfulness comes from Jon Kabat-Zinn. And it's a pretty popular definition. Jon Kabat-Zinn is considered to be the pioneer of what's called secular mindfulness, which basically means that he's one of the first to bring mindfulness more into a clinical setting, especially in the West. But of course, we know that mindfulness goes way, way back into different spiritual and contemplative traditions. So Jon Kabat-Zinn says that mindfulness is the awareness that arises from paying attention on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. So let's let that sink in for a second. The awareness that arises from paying attention on purpose, in this present moment, non-judgmentally. When I first thought of mindfulness, I thought to myself, well, that's just paying attention. Great. I'm always mindful. I'm always paying attention. In school, I was paying attention. I'm always paying attention to what's on TV, the Real Housewives of Atlanta. I'm always paying attention. So I'm mindful, right? But mindfulness is a little bit different from just being attentive. And there are 3 specific characteristics that go along with mindfulness that separate it from just being attentive. The first is intentionality. So there is an intention to be attentive. How many times have on Instagram, my direct messages on Instagram to see what my friend sent me earlier? And you get on your phone, you get on Instagram, and before you know it, you're 30 minutes deep into scrolling through your timeline, double tapping, all of the things that are on your timeline, and you haven't even checked what your friend sent you, right? You're attentive. The social media got your attention, but not in the way that you initially intended. So with mindfulness, there's this quality of attentiveness or intentionality of attentiveness. The second characteristic, which a lot of folks mentioned in the chat, was this openness to the present moment. So there's this healthy vulnerability and a practice of opening ourselves up to what is happening in the moment as it is. And finally, there's observing what is happening without judgment. So instead of judging it or trying to change it or trying to get away from it, we're present with it and we're observing it. So one example that I like to think of with this is when I first started to set boundaries in my life. I used to be very boundaryless, right? So I made a decision to start implementing healthy boundaries in my life. And one of the things that I started to experience internally every time I set a boundary was this feeling of guilt. And initially, I would want to get away from the guilt. I was judging it as something that was bad. So I wanted to get away from it. And the way that I would try to get away from it would be to take back my boundary. And in the long run, this proved to be very detrimental to what it was that I was trying to do, which is set healthier boundaries for all the different relationships in my life. So being with that feeling of guilt, but judging it as something that was bad, was causing me to, it was me not being mindful, right? I was simply reacting to the experience, and then I was trying to run from it and it wasn't serving me. So I hope that kind of gives you a little bit of understanding of that observation period, that observation piece with mindfulness. Observing non-judgmentally without trying to change that feeling of guilt. And mindfulness can be thought of in a few different ways. So there's the formal practice of mindfulness, which is what most people think of. They think of meditation, right? We can have a seated mindfulness meditating, mindful eating, mindful walking, mindful breathing. There are different ways to formally practice mindfulness. And then from there, we have the state of mindfulness. So it's moments of mindfulness throughout our day. Maybe we're washing the dishes and suddenly we bring mindfulness into that experience. And then from there, we move on to trait level mindfulness, which is essentially where mindfulness turns into a habit. And it becomes more and more a part of who we are, a part of how we think. So for example, we become mindful listeners. We become mindful speakers. We are mindful teachers, advocates, friends, and partners. And the understanding is that the more we have a formal practice of mindfulness, the more we integrate that formal practice into our routine, the more moments of mindfulness we have, which then leads to elevated trait level mindfulness, where mindfulness starts to become more and more of a habit. And it's just like training any other muscle in your body. So you train, you go to the gym and you become stronger and you're able to utilize that strength in your body. So we practice mindfulness, we have more moments of mindfulness, which eventually lead to elevated trait levels of mindfulness. So how does it help? How does it work? Ooh, uh-oh. We got our code word, our secret code word. If you're participating in the challenge, the secret code word is change. Okay, so how does mindfulness help? How does it work? So generally speaking, there are 4 categories of the human experience. We have our circumstances, our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. So circumstances, what's happening right now around me, right? What's happening right now? For example, let's think of a scenario. Okay, so you're youth workers, right? You have a student who shows up to your program and you say, hey, Leah, right? We have a student named Leah. So, hey, Leah, how are you doing today? You're welcoming her, right? And she rolls her eyes and says, fine, I'm okay. That's a circumstance. Now, I probably will have thoughts about that circumstance, which will then lead to me having an emotional experience, which will then influence my behavior, how I respond to that experience. Now, for most of us, if we're not practicing mindfulness, right? For the most part, we're on autopilot. So we'll usually have a circumstance and we will immediately move to a behavior. Okay, and this is what this slide is showing us. So without mindfulness, we'll have the stimulus, right? Leah came in, I asked her how she was doing, and she rolled her eyes and she said, I'm fine. And then I had my reaction. So maybe my reaction in this moment is, you know what, young lady, I don't understand what the attitude is about. That was very disrespectful. You can step outside and we'll have a conversation in front of the rest of the class, right? That's my reaction. Now, without mindfulness, what's happening is that I'm having a thought about this. I'm having a thought, which then leads to an emotion, but I'm not conscious. It's happening on a subconscious level. And I'm moving very quickly through this experience and I'm just reacting. And the idea is that with mindfulness, I have the circumstance, the experience, but because I've been practicing breathing, focusing on my breath, right? Different ways of formally practicing my mindfulness, I'm increasing my moment of mindfulness. And then in this moment, I might have this experience where Leah comes in. I ask her how she's doing, and she rolls her eyes, right? And instead of reacting to whatever story I'm telling about it in my mind, subconsciously, unconsciously, whatever that experience is that I'm having in my body, maybe it's shame. Maybe I'm feeling shame, but maybe I don't know yet. I haven't processed it fully. I tell myself, you know what? I know I really want to just defend myself right now and have her walk out of this classroom, but instead, I'm going to make a different decision. I'm going to pause. I'm going to let her sit down and I'm going to let this move through my body and I'll have a conversation with her later. So the idea is that with mindfulness, we learn to cultivate this space within ourselves. Mindfulness gives us space. And there's this quote that really illustrates this very well by Viktor Frankl, who is a Holocaust survivor. And Victor says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. So mindfulness gives us this space. Space gives us choice. And choice is freedom. Now, there's a lot of science, a lot of research out there. And although the research on mindfulness is very, we have 30, so there's 30 years of research on mindfulness, but that's still considered to be in its infancy. So keep all of this in mind. That there's a lot, the research that has been done really supports this idea that we've been talking about the creation of space, which gives us the freedom to choose our responses on an everyday basis. Now, the research on mindfulness shows that mindfulness thickens what is called the prefrontal cortex, okay? And let me make sure you guys can see this. The prefrontal cortex is responsible for, it's responsible for improved executive functioning skills. And so when we think about, like an executive director, the CEO of your brain, your prefrontal cortex is the CEO of your brain. And it's responsible for skills like organization, planning, task initiation, time management, your working memory, flexibility, attention, self-awareness. It's essentially what makes us human, what differentiates us from other animals. And so what they've seen is over time, that prefrontal cortex actually thickens. And this is called neuroplasticity. So it used to be believed that whatever brain you were born with, that was it. You really couldn't do anything about it. But we've learned over time that you can actually change the structure of your brain, for example, through mindfulness by thickening your prefrontal cortex. And so when we thicken our prefrontal cortex, the idea is that that leads to improved executive functioning skills. So this is how that works, that space concept, right? We have a stressful situation and our brain is receiving all of this data, all of this input. And the amygdala, which is usually responsible for interpreting the emotions and responsible for fight or flight. Without mindfulness, if there's a stressful situation that comes in, what happens is what's called the amygdala hijacked. the amygdala will hijack that experience and won't send that information to your prefrontal cortex, which usually will say, okay, hold on. Is this actually a physical threat, right? In the past, when it comes to our ancestors, when we were outside and there were all of these physical dangers, right? There's a lion outside, something's outside that could kill us and eat us. We needed to respond very quickly. So we have this adaptation of fight or flight. And there's this physical experience that occurs, right? We suddenly have this clarity in terms of I need to survive, I need to run, I need to go, all of these hormonal changes. So this was useful to us. But because the environment has changed so rapidly, we don't really have these same physical threats. But our brain hasn't really necessarily caught on to that just yet. So without mindfulness, a lot of times what will happen is you'll have this stressful situation and your amygdala might interpret that as, oh, I could die. Right? And so you have the same experience, that constant fight or flight, as you would if you really were in actual danger. But today's stressors are more mental. They're more, my boss sent me an email saying, hey, we need to talk. And all of a sudden, my flight mode, as if I'm going to die, but that's not really what's happening, right? So that's called the amygdala hijack. And when we have the amygdala hijack, that's what leads to this unconscious reaction. And so we lack clarity. We're triggered basically, and we're moving through the experience and responding to it disproportionately, emotionally, and maybe even physically with our behavior to what's happening. So, for example, when we go back to that example of my student walking into the classroom, if I say, hey, how are you doing? And she rolls her eyes, I might, if I don't have that mindfulness, right? I might experience that as, it could trigger something in me, an old wound in me of, I feel disrespected. I feel rejected. I feel, I'm making it mean that maybe deep down inside on a subconscious level, I'm being shamed in front of everybody. And so I could project that back onto my student unconsciously and call it, she's just being disrespectful and I'm disciplining her, when really I might actually be projecting that feeling of shame. And then I embarrass her in front of the rest of the class. And I'm telling a story about why she came in and rolled her eyes and I took it personally, right? Even though the reality of it is, I don't actually know why she did that. I'm making it mean something that I haven't confirmed yet. So with mindfulness, we prevent that amygdala hijack by thickening that prefrontal cortex. And so the prefrontal cortex comes in, right, and says, hold on now, wait a minute. I know I'm feeling shame in my body. But is that what this really means? Okay, it's the CEO of my brain. And it says, let's slow down. Yes, the unconscious trigger. Yes. Let's slow down. Let's give this a moment. Let's give this a beat. And let's see what happens, right? Being present without judgment, without telling a story, and allowing the situation to unfold from a place of compassion, understanding, and curiosity. Okay, I'm gonna pause. Belina, is there anything coming up in the chat? Because I really do want to interact with folks. And
yes, Tiffany was saying teach. Elise was sharing this when you were talking about that unconscious shame that comes up. So yeah, I think people are really, and me too. I'm also like, wow, this is really powerful things to be reminded about.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Good. Yeah, and if you guys have any questions throughout, please. I know we'll have a question and answer towards the end, but like I said, I love to interact with folks and for this to be a co-creative process. So ask away. All right. So as you can imagine, right? The results then with the mindfulness practices, we have that increased self-awareness, increased focus, improved memory, reduced rumination, reduced stress levels, improved emotional and self-regulation, which is key to success for young people, for adults, for everybody. When we can self-regulate and we have this alignment with our prefrontal cortex and the rest of our brain, we're in harmony and we're able to respond to everyday stressors more skillfully. We're able to respond to our relationships more skillfully with compassion and openness. It seems like it's so great. And we just need time to sit down and be with ourselves. And we really wanted to going to go ahead and move into it. So as a youth worker, I did not know this at first, but before your students show up and interact with any of your programs, any of your curriculums, right? Maybe you have a social emotional curriculum around healthy relationship skills, right? Healthy communication, stress management. Before they interact with any of that wonderful work that you're doing, they interact with you first. And believe it or not, you are quite literally the primary intervention. So adults play a pivotal role, a really critical role in the development of a young person, both in terms of relationships and intellect, but also on a physical, biological level. So human beings are not born with completely developed brains and nervous systems. I didn't know this. Infants, that means infants don't have the ability to self-regulate, right? So that ability to manage those disruptive emotions. And they really depend on their adult caregivers to act as their soothing systems until they eventually develop their own nervous system to the point where they can start self-regulating. And this takes some time. That prefrontal cortex for a young person doesn't stop fully developing until I believe it was 25 years old. So it takes a lot of time. And this relationship piece between an adult, a safe adult, and a young person is critical to their development, literally, quite literally on a when a kid falls, right? The first thing they'll do is look up to who they trust the most, the adult. They'll look up. And if the adult is freaking out, like, oh my God, my baby, the kid will start freaking out. Feel that pain all of a sudden. But if that kid falls down and there are adults around with really regulated nervous systems who can hold a grounded space, the child has a greater chance of, okay, maybe this isn't so bad. And what we learned is that pain is actually very subjective. So this is a really good illustration of how that nervous system communication works between adults and young people. And I've done it myself too with young people, where I started to intuitively figure it out as a kid when I was helping to babysit. If I'm really calm, I can actually help calm down the rest of the kids in my mom's daycare. So again, this isn't just for, it's called co-regulation, right? It's not just for babies. This is really important for babies, but even into adolescence, there are scientific findings that young people depend on mature brains to initially assist in that micro-regulation of their inner world. And ideally, this happens interactively over time, back and forth, until the child learns to grow up into adulthood and learns how to self-regulate. And even as adults, sometimes we still need others to help us co-regulate, which is why we talk about mental health and therapy and not being in isolation, right? When we're experiencing really tough emotions, really tough times in our life, being with other safe people who can help ground us on a nervous system level is critical to our mental well-being. And this is something that's really cool that illustrates this. I love the science. It's so fascinating to me how, what we've learned intuitively as a people is now being verified and supported by science. How, what our ancestors and our ancestors have, the different practices of mindfulness that we have is really being verified here. So there's something called there's these things called mirror neurons, and they're small circuits of cells in our brain which are activated both when we perform a certain action and when we observe another person performing it. So like, have you seen, when somebody grabs a lemon and bites into it, you might respond physically, literally, as if you've bit into that lemon? Well, it's that same idea, right? And what this is illustrating is that communication with one another is happening on a physical level, and sometimes even on an unconscious level. And this is especially true for young people who learn through modeling, right? So we are constantly unconsciously picking up on people's facial expressions and these subtle cues. And there's this really cool study that was done where, here, let me pull it up really quickly. So in the study, participants were exposed to, let me grab the details. They were exposed to various facial expressions, right? And for 30 milliseconds at a time. And that's not enough time for us to pick up on what's going on, what we just saw consciously, right? We'd have to be picking up on it subconsciously. And what happened was, every time they saw these images, their muscles that would allow them to mimic that expression were activated. That electricity, right? They put a bunch of stuff on them, and I don't look. I'm not the science person, but they put a bunch of equipment on them, and eventually figured out that we are picking up on these cues on an unconscious level very quickly, very, very quickly. So communication is happening on a nervous system level between the adult, you, and your young people. So now the question becomes, what is the condition of your nervous system? When you're showing up to your young people, when you're showing up to your programs, what is the condition of your nervous system? Because that's what you're transmitting to the young people you interact with. If you're burnt out, fatigued, anxious, distressed, the young people are responding to that. But if you're empathetic, present, attuned, then they're going to mirror that back to you, or you have a greater chance of them mirroring that back to you, and they're going to respond to that. So your nervous system being regulated, your self-care, the internal work that you do is the most important intervention that you can provide for young people. It is the most important thing that you can provide for young people, because you serve as that anchor. When a young person is distressed and you can breathe deep into that and hold that space for them, that unbothered space, that grounded space, that compassionate space, that understanding space, then you give them an anchor to hold on to, a pillar to hold on to, so that they can attune to your nervous system and then regulate their own nervous system. So with the example with my young person, right, Leah, who shows up to class, to program, I ask her how she's doing, and she rolls her eyes and she says, "I'm fine." Without mindfulness, on a subconscious level, I might be triggered, and I might be telling a deeper story that this is about me, that I am unworthy of respect, that I am unworthy of love, that I am unworthy of being seen. And I might react, right, from that place of shame. And when we react from places of shame and fear, we're projecting that onto other people. Others tend to perceive that aggressive as aggression, which then could exacerbate the issue and make them react defensively to us. And now we have this back and forth of misunderstanding on a subconscious level between two human beings. But if I have mindfulness, right, and I practice this, and my prefrontal cortex is growing, and my ability to sit with tough emotions in my body grows, right, I increase that capacity, then I might have these moments of opportunity to deeply connect with my students. So she shows up and she says to me, you know, I'm fine. And she rolls her eyes. I might breathe into that and say, okay, what does that mean? And I'm curious suddenly because I've stopped telling the story that it's about me, that it's personal. And instead, I open up this opportunity. I allow myself to be vulnerable and say, I want to know what that means for my student. And so I don't embarrass her in front of the rest of the class. And afterwards, I ask her to stand outside with me and say, hey, honey, how are you doing? What's going on? You seem distressed, right? I hold space for her. And who knows what could come out of that? Maybe she tells me that something happened at home. And how often does this happen, right? This has happened so many times in program with me, where I initially think this is so personal, it's about me. And then I open myself up to have a conversation, to be curious, to really hold space for my own emotions, right? Suspend my emotions, hold space and be compassionate for them. And then be an anchor for my student and say, what's going on? What's happening? Talk to me. And that's where true and genuine connection comes from. All right. So, Belina, let's check in. How's everybody feeling? How's everyone doing? Questions, thoughts?
Soraya on the Hoover app said that they really like how you're breaking everything down and giving examples.
Good, good. Thank you, Soraya. So I'll wait a minute to see if there are any other thoughts, responses, questions, and then we can get into trying it out for ourselves. I see some messages come in. Elise says, we cannot simply allow practitioners, adults, to alienate our youth because of our unconscious insecurities. Great message, yes. Definitely, Vatsa says, definitely giving me food for thought about our ongoing engagement with our youth and our groups. Thank you, you're welcome. Shelia says, this is so helpful in reassuring that I'm taking the right steps to guide my students. Thank you so much, you're welcome, Shelia. And I'm so glad to hear that you're already doing this work. Okay, so as the messages come in, I see more messages coming in. This also applies to how we grown folks treat each other. Oh, yes, absolutely, Tiffany. You know, when I started to practice mindfulness in 2019, consistently, one of the things that really motivates me still to sit down and practice for 20, 30 minutes a day is how much my relationships have improved. I kid you not, I used to be so triggered. I used to get into arguments, fights with the people that I love the most. And now I find myself actually being able to sit through emotions and have conversations from that place of curiosity. And what I learn in the process blows my mind. It's so healing to recognize a lot of the times what the story that we're telling, that this is personal, what this person is, you know, showing me and revealing to me is personal. That's usually, at least in my experience, not true. It's not true. How other people react and respond has way more to do with them than it does with us. And that is so healing, to know that we're complex human beings that are just trying to make sense of life. And then from there, we can be so compassionate with one another and just hold space for one another and respond from a place of love and with the intention to connect rather than disconnect. Yes, absolutely. I follow mindfulness by maintaining my inner calm, and everything you said definitely is something I can relate to. Mercy, I'm loving what I see so far. Awesome, you guys. Okay, so let's give it a try, okay? So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen for a moment, and we're gonna try a body scan. And this is something you can take with you. Okay. Screen off, Belina?
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, folks. So we're gonna try a body scan. And this is a easy to do mindfulness practice that helps us bring that mindfulness awareness onto our body. And our body is so informative, so powerful. Yet for most of us, we live in a head up society where everything is very mental in the Western world. We're on our computers, we're on our screens, we're sitting down. So this could lead to a disconnect throughout most of the day with our body. And our body has so much wisdom, so much information to give us. So the body scan helps us reconnect and hold space for what's going on in our physical world. So what I'm going to ask you to do, or invite you to do, what I'm going to invite you to do is, the first thing we do, this is how we teach our kids, is we have our mindful bodies. And what a mindful body looks like is you can have, if you're sitting on a chair, feet on the ground, right? So you want to anchor yourself to the ground. You want to have a relaxed but straight back, right? You don't want to be so straight that you're uncomfortable, but you don't want to be so slouched over that you could fall asleep. Because I promise you, you're going to fall asleep. If you have any issues with insomnia, mindfulness before bed, you'll be knocked out. Okay, so straight, relaxed back, feet on the ground. I'm going to invite you to close your eyes. And when Belina rings the bell, listen for the sound until you can't hear it anymore. And then I invite you to take 3 deep, mindful breaths. Okay? When you can't hear the bell anymore, take 3 mindful breaths. Let your eyes close and your body be still and quiet, and get comfortable in your chair. Bring your attention to the top of your head. See if you can feel any little feelings or sensations. Maybe there are prickly or vibrating feelings. Maybe it feels tingly or soft. Just pay attention. Now we're gonna scan the rest of our body for sensations. And a sensation is anything you can feel in your body. You may feel very strong sensations in your body, or you might feel weak ones. Or maybe you don't feel anything at all at certain points, and that's okay. Just be curious no matter what you feel. From the top of your head, Slowly begin moving to your face. Pay attention to your forehead. Pay attention to your eyes. Relax your eyes. Pay attention to your cheeks. Your nose. Your mouth. Relax your jaw. Bring attention to your chin. The back of your head. Notice your neck and your throat. Now bring attention to your left shoulder. Rest your attention there for a moment. Notice your upper left arm, your elbow, and now your lower arm and hand. Now notice all 5 fingers. Just bring curious attention to your fingers. Move your attention now to your right shoulder. Feel your right upper arm, your right elbow, your lower arm, your hands and fingers. Come back to your back and feel your upper back for any sensations. You may not feel anything, or maybe you feel some discomfort or some pressure or tingles or itches. Scan your attention across your back and now down your spine to your lower back. Now come up to your chest and feel sensations in your chest. Feel your belly. Now notice where your body is touching the chair or the ground, however you're seated. Feel your left leg from the hip to the knee. Feel the knee and the calf. Now place your attention in your right hip and feel the right thigh. Your knee, your calf, your foot, and your toes. Now notice your entire body at once. Bring all of your attention on your entire body. Notice everything, all at one time. And now when Belina rings the bell, again, listen for the sound until it is completely done. And then slowly open your eyes. Thank you all so much for participating in that. I know we're at the end of our time right now. If there are any questions, we'll stay on for a couple of minutes. If there are any questions, if you need to go, you can go. But if you have any questions, you can, here, let me share our screen and give our email. If you're still in the chat, I would love to hear what that was like for you. How did that feel? Anything about your experience, good or bad? I see a question by Rosie. Rosie says, this is what I needed to hear again. In the midst of the work, we get lost and it's hard to pull away and understand we stand as youth workers. I have a question. How do we respond after you showed youth you're drained and fatigued and they picked it up? Well, the first thing, Rosie, I would say is to be graceful and compassionate with yourself. Any more judgment that we bring into that situation, for example, thinking, oh no, I just show them that I'm fatigued and exhausted, this is so terrible. That's just extra judgment, right? We don't really need it. So holding space for yourself and allowing yourself to be a human being and saying, you know what, I'm drained today. I'm exhausted. And I showed that to my students. And honoring that as it is, that is a part of regulating your nervous system. That is a part of holding space for your humanity. And I see Rosie says that you can switch it by gaining your calm, practicing mindfulness with them. As you do, they follow you, also begin to feel calm. Exactly. So in that moment, I think there's this fear as youth workers, right, as adults, that if children see us in our humanity, that somehow, at least for me, my authority goes away, right? Suddenly it's like, if they know that I'm flawed, I no longer have authority. Oh my God, what is that going to mean, right? Again, it goes back to these stories that we tell about these situations. And most of the stories that we tell then lead to the emotions that we feel, the shame, for example, which then leads to the suffering. The suffering that we experience usually is experienced on the emotional level. So if we can get out of that story mode and just allow the experience to be what it is without judgment, then we can hold space for ourselves. And for example, like what Ankita says, hey kids, I'm really stressed out today. Why don't we practice mindfulness together? Why don't we take a few deep breaths? Let's model for our students what it's like to be a human being and to have these moments and then to regulate ourselves. It's a wonderful teaching opportunity, like Ankita said. Thank you guys so much. Ankita, please, yes. So my email is yasmin@wmcacademy.org. Okay, I'm putting it in the chat. And Belina's is Belina at wmcacademy.org. Good. Very relaxing. It hits different, when someone's there to guide you, right? Vulnerability is a seed of trust. Yes, Elise. And yes, if you missed it, the code word, thank you, Mona, is change. Thank you all so much for joining. Again, reach out to us if you have any questions, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Enjoy the rest of the BSK Summit. I hope you can go into it relaxed and grounded now. Bye.